Good morning. Welcome to our last day.
Cheers, it's Friday, we made it.
Friday. Welcome to our last day of the AIA California Healthcare Facilities Forum.
Thanks for joining us. Today, like the other past couple days, our agenda is our keynote speaker, and our good friend Ron Galloway is going to really kick us off on a great Friday. Ron's a futurist, but I swear to God, he's more of a comedian than he is anything else. So Meredith will do the introduction in a sec. After that, we'll have our breakout session at 10 o'clock. During the breakout session today, we have an option to click on a breakout to do the virtual tour of the Tangram Healthcare setup with exam room, doctor's office, nurse station.
All the Steelcase healthcare products that are new and make you just want to be sick.
So it'll be a virtual tour. You'll get to see all the setups that they've created for this. So that's a great opportunity. Then after that, we will be having our panelists. And the panelists will be on technology and telehealth in the time of COVID.
I just want to say that panel is sort of a culmination of so much of what we've been talking about throughout this forum, which is basically, okay, we've talked about telemedicine, we've talked about, telehealth. Now let's really see what that means, how it's happening, and other than just having a doctor visit on your phone, what else is coming down the pike?
Exactly.
So, I guess that's my cue.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so here we go. I am now going to officially introduce Ron Galloway. Many of you will remember Ron from last year, and he is back because we had such overwhelming feedback that he was great and people would love to hear from him again. So here he is again. Briefly, Ron is the author. He's an author. He's also a filmmaker. He's president of Method Research, which is an international research firm. And what makes him, I think, extremely interesting is that he studies the disruptive and very unintended effects of new technologies, both on finance and on healthcare. He directed a very controversial film called Why Walmart Works, and I believe that landed him on the Jon Stewart Show, and also CNBC, MSNBC, ABC, World News Tonight, etc. He's also been quoted in written articles for the Huffington Post, for the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, New Yorker Magazine. Ron is a graduate of Georgia Tech and is a former investment research analyst for Smith Barney in a prior life. Most importantly, Ron lives in Augusta, Georgia, where he can watch the golf tournaments. He loves golf, he loves baseball, he loves his dog and cat who sleep on his feet. And I'm guessing that they're probably doing that right now as he is coming to us live from his home. So take it away, Ron.
Unmute. Come on, Ron, you got to unmute, bud.
I'm unmuting myself. There. Lord have mercy. I'm very happy to be with y'all today. My name is Ron Galloway. As was said, I'm from Augusta, Georgia. In fact, the National is about 2 blocks down the street from me, where in 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be having the Winter Masters for the first time ever. And I was telling Scott and Meredith before, I would encourage everybody to try and watch, because they're going to have the fall flora out. It's not just going to be azaleas. It's going to be really spectacularly beautiful. Even if you don't like golf, then I encourage you to watch it. Anyway, I spoke with y'all last year, and I'm going to touch on a few of the same themes that I talked about last year, but it's amazing how much things can change in a year. Almost everything has changed in a year. Things are moving so fast, it's hard to keep up. I've told people my presentation changes about every 2 to 3 weeks because things are changing so fast. And for this speech, I was looking for kind of an appropriate analogy to use to talk about what I wanted to talk about, but in a more sort of in a more meaningful way. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to sort of use an analogy to this book. This book is The Three-Body Problem. It's a very famous science fiction book, which just it won the Hugo Award. Barack Obama gave it a great review. Tons of people have read it. It's going to be a Netflix series. I encourage y'all all to read it. But the themes in this book, I think, and in The Three-Body Problem itself, reflect what's going on in the part of healthcare that I want to talk to y'all about today. The three-body problem. Yeah.
Do me a favor and click the lower right-hand corner and do it as a slideshow.
Oh, it's not working as a slideshow?
Not right now.
Oh, okay. Well, then lower right-hand corner.
There you keep. Oh no, over.
Okay, it's gonna take my beautiful face away, but I'm gonna do it.
We're still gonna see you.
But y'all can handle that, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
All right, hold on. Give me 1 second. Well, let me back up 1 minute. I know what it needs to be doing. I apologize to everybody. Take a 5 minute, not a 5 minute, take a 1 minute break while I figure out PowerPoint, which I should be able to figure out, seeing as how I wrote a book on it.
Exactly.
One would think that I would know how to do a PowerPoint.
Exactly.
All right, is that better?
Much better, and we can still see your beautiful face.
Well, thank you. Even with this haircut, you know what happened with this haircut? I got a bad haircut, and I've been giving my dog haircuts during COVID, and I started looking at those dog shears, and I was like, you know what?
I can do this.
I'm using the dog shears. So this is a dog shear haircut. I saved myself $28. Anyway, so what we're talking about is the three-body problem is a problem in Newtonian physics, and it's not very complicated. Well, it is complicated, but it's a simple concept, and it's a concept I think applies to a lot of things. What happens is when you have two bodies that have gravitational pulls, for instance, the Earth and the Moon, when there are just two of them, you can calculate the position of Earth as point A, the position of Moon as point B. And it's very simple with one equation to calculate where A and B are going to be at any point in time. All right. Well, what happens is when you introduce a third body into it, let's say Mars, which would be point C, everything becomes completely unpredictable. You cannot, with any certainty, just adding one extra body makes things completely unpredictable. And I'll tell you the effect it has in the solar system. They said that if Saturn changed its orbit by 1 meter, it would throw off all the orbital paths in the entire solar system. And it would be completely random. Nobody would be able to figure it out. So the three-body problem is a problem of complexity when you add different things that have an effect on each other. All right, that's the overall framework for the talk. And where I'm going to start now, what I'm talking about mostly is healthcare delivery and how outside parties are going to affect healthcare delivery and into what healthcare facilities they're going to go. So it used to be back in the beginning of the 19th century, or was that the 20th century? And in 1900, most healthcare was delivered by a doctor coming to your house, doing a house call. In fact, in 1940, house calls accounted for 40% of physician interactions, but by 1980, house calls were just 1% of physician interactions because things had moved either to the doctor's office or to the hospital. So initially, in 1900, we just had the patient and the doctor. We just had two bodies, and their orbits coincided in a very predictable manner, right? But then we introduced the hospital and the office into it, and it made things vastly more complex and vastly more unpredictable. And then we added a fourth body, payers, who's paying for all this, which really complicated things. It's like another planet in the solar system. that has three planets inside of it: the patient paying, the insurance company paying, and the government paying. So there's a three-body problem going on inside another four-body problem. It's a problem of complexity and trying to understand that complexity. And as I said, healthcare moved over to hospitals. Right down the street from me is University Hospital, where my dad was born. My dad trained. My mom worked there. My dad worked there. As I mentioned last year, my ex-wife worked there. Both my kids were born there. I have strong ties to that hospital, but that hospital is moving into facilities sort of away from the hospital for a variety of reasons. And let me show you the trends in terms of hospitals. This is from CDC in 1975 up there in the top in the green. You see that these are the number of beds. There were 1,400,000 beds in all hospitals in 1975, and there are about 900,000 in 2015. So the number of beds went down almost 30%. And what's interesting, if you look at the hospitals with 6 to 24 beds, they went from about 5,600 beds to 8,000 beds, whereas everyone else went down until you get to large institutions with 500 beds or more that went from, basically it stayed steady. It went down in about 2005, but then stayed steady until about 2008. All right. And if you look at the number of hospitals in 1975, we had 7,000 hospitals. Now we have 5,500 hospitals, but we have an increasing population during that time period, during those 40 years. In 1975, there were 299 hospitals with 6 to 24 beds, and there's nearly 500 now. All right. And if you look at the beds that are 500 and more, that's held steady and in fact increased a little bit. So what we're seeing is that we're having more smaller hospitals and more really large hospitals. That's the trend that's been happening. But something new has introduced itself now, and that's the fact that hospitals have become giant data repositories. All right, everything's all about data in hospitals now. When my dad was a doctor, basically everything was stored in paper files or on 3x5 cards in his pocket. And then we had another body introduce itself, which was siloed data in electronic healthcare records, which was kept on site at a server on the hospital. So we had 5,500 or so servers, in hospitals. But then now, in the past 5 years, really, everything's been migrating to the cloud. And that's the third body problem that has introduced itself into healthcare data. And it's really throwing a large degree of unpredictability into the delivery of healthcare, and it's doing so by attracting big health. Big health is attracted to data. They have to have data, and now that all data, EHR data, electronic healthcare data, is going to be living in the cloud, not in individual servers in hospitals, big tech wants access to that data, and that's why you see so many of them moving into healthcare. It's simply because of the data. And this was originally driven by something called meaningful use, which is why hospitals had to get EHRs in the first place. But now the government has mandated that all the individual EHRs, and there's about 250 EHR systems that hospitals use, be interoperable. In other words, they all talk to each other. And the way they're starting to talk to each other now is through something called the FHIR standard, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. If you deal with healthcare, you're going to be hearing this term a lot. And it's a standard, sort of like the standard that allowed Microsoft Word to read WordPerfect files back in the day. If you're as old as I am, you remember that. And what people want to happen is that for all this data to have machine learning or AI applied to it. And when I think of AI, I think of acquiring information. That, to me, is what it stands for. AI is really acquiring knowledge and then building on that knowledge through machine learning. And rather than call it artificial intelligence, I like to call it ambient intelligence, because the data is coming from so many places in a hospital. It can be coming from a patient's room. It can be coming from EHR. It can be coming from nurses' notes. All right. It can be coming from a variety of places. And what ambient intelligence in a building, in a facility does, is take all this data from all these sensors, put it together, and give it context. Last year, I gave you all the example of the magic bands at the Disney parks, which have information on you. It'll open your hotel room. It'll allow you to pay. It knows your favorite rides. It follows you during the day. It collects all this information, gathers it together, and gives it context. It's one big ambient intelligence environment. So just think of hospitals becoming like big Disney worlds with all this data coming from all these places. And now we've gotten to a point where computers are fast enough that we're able finally to make sense of this data. Hospitals are a treasure trove of data due to existing and upcoming sources of data, some of which I'm going to be talking about, including wearables. So this is, in our healthcare environment today, this is where you're going to be seeing data flowing into, places it's flowing in from. And now we have the ability, because there's a standard, a FHIR standard. It's sort of like if everybody decided everything was on an Excel spreadsheet, then the Excel spreadsheet would be that standard. That standard is able to look at all this data and make sense of it. And there's a lot of data. If you look at the red line there, a study was done earlier this year that showed that during a single hospital stay, a patient can generate 200,000 points of data. So take that and multiply that out by, tens of millions of hospital patients per year, and you've got a lot of data that can tell you a whole lot of things. And why is this data so valuable? Well, ask yourself this question. Why is Facebook worth $775 billion when none of us pay for Facebook? Why is it worth that much money? It's because that's how much the data is worth. And what's interesting to me is that's unverified data. I could tell Facebook that I'm basically Tom Cruise, which I'm clearly not, but I could say I was, and that's the information they would have on me. But information in a hospital is pretty much verified data. It's clean data, and that's why it's so valuable. So what we've got now, we had two bodies, the patient and the existing institutions, the hospitals and doctors' offices. But now big data is the third body that's moved into our third body problem. And I want to talk about big data and what their effect is going to be on that part of the gravitational pull that they are going to affect on healthcare. There was a poll done recently by CB Insights, who does great healthcare research. And they asked a lot of people which tech giant will have the biggest impact on healthcare. People said Google first, Amazon second, Apple third. Well, here's really what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Apple, followed by Amazon, followed by Google, but in the lead, I'm not going to even make it a mystery. In the lead, it's going to be Walmart, especially in facilities. And I'm going to show you all that in a bit. So, and a big reason why all these big companies are wanting to get into healthcare is because healthcare is really the only big business left. It's a $3 trillion business in America alone out of a $17 trillion economy. That's the only business with enough scale to move the needle on their earnings. They can't go into businesses that will just make them $5 billion a year if you're a $1 trillion business. That doesn't make sense. They need to go into big businesses, and healthcare is really the only big business left. And I'm going to start off with the one I think has the least impact, which is going to be Google. We all know their logo. Google is already a huge player in healthcare because of one thing. Google reports that 7% of its daily searches are healthcare related, and it receives around 1 billion healthcare questions every day. So Google already is one of the biggest healthcare institutions in the world. And a lot of people have done a lot of interesting things. They will mine Google data. For instance, in Minnesota, there's a very interesting experiment where they could predict flu season by 3 days by examining the parts of Minnesota that were doing Google searches for the term flu symptoms. All right. They were able to use their predictive analytics, which is what Google is all about, to determine that. As an aside, Google also owns TensorFlow, which is open source, but it's essentially the machine learning platform that basically everybody uses. So that's a huge influence Google also has. Our friends at CB Insights did a great graphic on Google's influence on healthcare, and I want to basically concentrate on them, on those two things that I just highlighted. Their clinical workflow tools, in particular Google Cloud, and DeepMind, and their company that's called Verily. And I'll explain Verily in a few minutes. But recall, Google is all about predictive analytics. They had Google Health for a while. It went quiet, but then they decided to fold DeepMind, which is the deep Google AI brain, into Google Health. So Google Health is essentially DeepMind now. Google has applied everything they've learned over 20 years. Now they're putting their algorithms into healthcare. And also Google is particularly famous for search, and they're opening up finally about what Google Health is doing. And a part of it is about search, because Google wants to be, no matter what EHR you're using, Google wants to be the search bar at the top of that the physician is searching for. Google wants to be what they are now. Google is sort of all our gateways into looking for stuff now. They also want to be the gateway for healthcare practitioners who are looking for information. They want to be at the top of every EHR. So that's one of their big plans, and they're already implementing it. They're implementing that in the cloud through telehealth with a group called Amwell. But Mayo Clinic is also a huge, huge user of Google Search as well as the Google Cloud. And I want to talk about Mayo in a few minutes in terms of what they're doing facility-wise up there with that huge, huge project. The other way that Google wants to disintermediate healthcare is, I spoke of the FHIR standard earlier, of different EHRs talking to each other. The two biggest are called Epic. The other one is Cerner. And let's say Epic and Cerner want to talk to each other. Google owns a company called Apigee, which is a play on words. API is for application programming interface, and the G stands for Google. But what it does is it's the intermediary between which both data will flow, and they're the ones that want to be the ones that translate the data. So they just don't want to be the search bar. They want to be where all data interoperability flows through. That's what Google is shooting for. Now, Verily, which is another part of that slide, Verily is a company that is basically taking their DeepMind resources and aggregating all the data that they're collecting and learning from it. And Verily is a fascinating company. And when they pitch themselves to hospitals, what they're saying is, we're helping you in the transition from volume care to value-based healthcare, which is where everything is going right now. It's already been done in California through capitation. You get paid for the overall health of a patient. And down at the bottom, you see we want to leverage our machine learning capabilities in helping hospitals make that transition. Another fascinating project of theirs, which Verily is doing, is called Project Baseline, where if you look at the bottom graphic, they recruit people to become part of Project Baseline, and then these people self-report their health data. They give up their X-rays, other health data, and they give Google, through access to a wearable, permission to look at their data day by day, minute by minute, and that lets Google study it. So each of these volunteers, and there are thousands of them, a lot of them are at Duke, are just giving Google all this data every day so Google can decide what actually is good health, because good health might not be what we actually think it is. You know, is good health having a BMI of 25? It might not actually be that. So the purpose of Project Baseline is to try and determine from an ongoing collection and integration of data, what is good health? Now, when I talked to you this time last year, Google had not done this, but they've done it now. They bought Fitbit, and I'm sure lots of y'all have a Fitbit. And they've really juiced up the Fitbit to do a lot more than it used to be able to do. It can do a lot of the same things that an Apple Watch can do now in terms of, you know, heart rate and actually skin temperature. It can do. And this is what they're going to use. The reason they acquired Fitbit for $2 billion is this is the way, along with the phone, that they are going to depend on collecting information at first from, you know, patients in hospitals, but then down the road from all of us. It has Hey Google and Alexa built into it, by the way. And I mentioned that study in Minnesota, but Google has also found through the Fitbit that they were able to detect, their algorithm was able to detect almost 50% of COVID patients one day before the users reported having symptoms. And they were able to do this with 70% accuracy. All right, that's what happens when you apply big machine learning to big pools of data. So Google's plan is to collect, aggregate, and study lots and lots of data. And they're going to be influential, but there are actually other companies that are going to be a little bit more influential. But at first, they're going to be influencing hospital-based care. And they're down there in that third body. They're adding more gravitational pull to that third body of big data that's affecting the healthcare system. All right, now we're going to talk about Apple, which is always fun to talk about. I love talking about them. I'm actually writing another book about Apple, but Apple has to get into healthcare. They have basically, Tim Cook has come out and said that Apple is going to be remembered as a healthcare company. As they move from hardware to services, which they are inexorably doing, because your iPhones are lasting longer, your iPads are lasting longer, so hardware sales are tapering off or staying steady, but their services are going up, such as Apple Music or the Apple Plus TV thing that they have going on now. They're moving towards services, and healthcare is the biggest service that they are looking at. JP Morgan estimated Apple's revenue from healthcare next year is going to be $13 billion. And in 2027, it's going to be $300 billion, which is super interesting because $300 billion is about the amount that Apple makes today from everything else. So they're talking about adding an entire doubling their revenues with healthcare alone. And of course, they're centering it all around the iPhone. And here's our friend Fire. You see at the bottom, Apple is also trying to be the dominant force in taking and being the conduit through which all this data, Fire data, has to pass through. They've invented something for developers called Fire Models, which makes putting that data together a whole lot easier. Here's their package. They actually just introduced it this summer. And what it does is they're trying to make Fire easy for their application developers, for their outside developers to use it. They want more and more developers, as many as they can, making as many healthcare apps as they possibly can. So there's Apple Health at the bottom, collecting information at first from just a few hospitals. At the beginning of 2019, there were 37 hospitals working for them, working with them. Right about now, there's around 1,500 that are sharing data. Remember, there's 5,500 hospitals in America that are actively sharing data with with Apple. So they're sharing more and more data with Apple. Apple's sharing it back, but Apple's also pushing it into its programming stack that you see over there in the right, starting with Apple Health and their programming stack underneath it, which then organizes all this information and allows it to be passed on to their application developers. This is what Apple wants to do. That's how they're going to turn into a huge company. Starting in the hospital, I talked a little bit about hospitals. A couple of interesting things they're doing is helping people get out of the hospital early. For instance, at UVA, they are helping parents get their child, if they're in a neonatal unit, if they're in the NICU, what they're doing is they're able to get the babies out of the NICU a little bit early by continuing the monitoring at home, right? You can see some of the monitoring equipment there, which has the advantage to the parents of, oh, we're able to bring our baby home, but also it frees up another bed in the NICU for another baby. So it's a great thing. And then the data is passed on to the hospital through an Apple application or somebody that writes an application for Apple. So that's one type of post-hospital care that they're helping with, but also surgery care. It's interesting, whenever you have surgery, you know how they try and get you to walk up and down the halls as quickly as they can? It's called a 6-minute walk test, right? And you can get so much information from a 6-minute walk test and so much information from Apple devices that can let doctors let you go home early and recover at home, and then, free up a bed in the hospital and decrease costs. But the 6-minute walk test is particularly interesting to me because of everything it can show you. All right. And remember, what Apple's doing is they're measuring in an ongoing way, they're aggregating the data, and then they're interpreting it. And what they're doing with the 6-minute walk test, as you go about your day, is it looks at dimensions. You see on the x-axis days since injury, which would be surgery, and then your walking speed on the top. All right. And what's going on is they take an ongoing measure of these things. This is a 7-day rolling average of these things, and they're determining if you're doing well on this. And what's interesting is they determine this by your walking speed, how fast you're walking, if it's increasing or if it's decreasing, by how long your steps are, because there's an accelerometer on the iPhone. So if your steps are real short, that means you're a little bit unsure, right? You're unsure of walking. They know the time that you have both feet on the ground, because that also could be an indicator of a problem with balance, and whether or not you're walking symmetrically or more left and more right. These are things that get sent back in real time to the hospitals to be able to evaluate you on an ongoing basis. And it's not just back to the hospital. They're going to be doing it to us, if you enable it on the phone, all the time as one piece of our overall health that goes into your Apple Health profile on your iPhone. And there on the right, you see the AirPods, which I'm going to talk about in a minute because they are particularly interesting. But before I do that, I have to talk about the Apple Watch, which, now will tell you that, you're in AFib. It's got an ECG on it. It'll tell you you're on AFib. What's particularly interesting about the Apple Watch to me is it can measure VO2 max. All right, the new Apple Watches. It can measure oxygen saturation and alert you if you're low. That's very important. It obviously monitors your heart rate and will let you know if you're tachycardic, which is your heart rate's going too fast, or bradycardic, which means your heart rate is going too low. If either of those happens, it will generate an ECG and send a PDF of that to your doctor if you put your doctor inside your iPhone. All right. It monitors ambient sound. And if you're in a place where things are too loud, say a Leonard Skinner concert, it might say, put your earplugs in. This has been over 100 decibels for 10 minutes. All right. It detects falls, which is one of its most important things, and why it's really being used a lot for seniors, because when a senior falls down, If they don't, the watch will ask you, "Are you okay?" And if not, you can say, "No, I'm not okay," and it sends a message to your healthcare provider or emergency services. And if you don't answer, it also sends a message that something's wrong here. You know, I had a friend of my mom's who was on the floor, fell down, was on the floor for 7 hours before anybody came in to check on her. And this way, you know immediately. Tracks your sleep. Now it tracks your hand washing and lets you know how long you should be washing your hands. It tracks your daily exercise. And, you know, on top of all that, you can pay for stuff at Costco with it, which is fantastic. There's a fellow, the best writer on Apple in the country is at a company called Simco, and he said, and he believes in the Clay Christensen model of when you look at something, what's the job that needs to be done? And he's decided that the Apple Watch has taken its job that needs to be done is health monitor and health preserver. In other words, being proactive about things. Now, the AirPods, which I have on right now, are particularly interesting. Apple's been filing patents on this for years. And if you're like me and you're a researcher, you follow these things to see what in the world they're up to. Well, now we have an idea of what they're up to. They want this to be in combination with your Apple Watch to be essentially your healthcare monitors. The AirPods are going to use an algorithm in the future to be able to impute your blood pressure. All right, what's the first thing your doctor checks for? It's your blood pressure. Your Apple Watch can't do it right now, but apparently your AirPods are going to be able to, using pulse waveform analysis, which I have no idea what that is. It'll also have its own heart monitor. What makes this particularly interesting to me is you just take the combination of those two things, the AirPods and the Apple Watch, and you've got something that on an ongoing basis, all the time, measures heart rate, ECG, blood pressure, temperature, fall detection, blood oxygen, gait analysis, walking, the 6-minute step, and it can be a kind of a very cool hearing aid, you know, listening for sounds that are too loud, but also picking up sounds that you can't hear yet. But the combination of the Apple Watch and the AirPods together without the iPhone, and now they're able to work without an iPhone, is less than $500. You're telling me that an insurance company wouldn't pay $500 to have continuous monitoring of their insured? Of course they were, and that's of course they would, and that's exactly where we're heading. Now, I mentioned what it listens for now. It has this thing called Live Listen. So what it can do is it can figure out what ambient noise is and let you hear a conversation across the room. Back when I made films, we used to always say, make friends with the boom guy, the sound recorder, because he hears everything that's going on set. He could just point his boom at anything and hear what's going on. But it's also got another interesting side effect. So if you're in a noisy traffic environment, it'll lower the sounds of traffic, but let you hear the things that are important for safety that you should be hearing, or voices. But some people say it can also have a voice profile to which, in theory, you could dial out the voices of people you don't want to listen to. Wouldn't that be awesome? I think so. Maybe that's just me, but I'm thinking it's everybody that's on this podcast right now. So Apple, this podcast, this conference right now. So Apple is just absolutely gone full bore into this. And one reason why I think people may trust Apple more than others is that Apple is known for its privacy. I trust them with my privacy. But here's where privacy gets a little bit creepy. Right now, there's a program in Singapore where if you have an Apple Watch and your iPhone, you can, the Singaporean government will actually pay you money if it knows that you're meditating, walking, swimming, sleeping well, and doing healthy things. So you're going to get paid for healthy habits. The exact same thing is going to happen. You know how Geico, if you're a safe driver, gives you lower rates? If you if you give your health insurer access to this information, they're going to give you lower rates for living healthier lifestyles. So it's no accident. Apple had an iPhone event this week, and it's no accident they made a huge deal about 5G, because 5G, when fully rolled out, will completely allow for some very science fiction things because it passes data so fast. So Apple is already into the hospitals, but they're pushing hospital care into the home, which I find completely interesting. And it's just another thing that strengthens the orbit of big data. Now I'm going to speed up a little bit. I actually, because I'm a nerd, I took an article that was 10 hospital execs predict the biggest tech retail disruptors to healthcare. And I took the interview, threw it into a word cloud, and these are the names that came up the most. By size, these are the most important names. CVS, and that's because they have 10,000 clinics. Optum, because they're going to be so strong in employer-based healthcare. Microsoft, essentially because of Azure, their Azure cloud. But then Amazon was second and Walmart was first. So let's talk about Amazon. All right, Amazon is completely in all our lives. We're all their customers. We're all their Prime members. If you look at the lower circle down there, there's 310 active customers, but they've also got that they have data on, but they've also got data on this joint venture called Haven that they did with JP Morgan and Berkshire, which is their entree into employer-based healthcare. Now, they've gone dark on it a little bit. Hadn't heard anything from them since May 13th, when Atul Gawande, who I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard of, kind of changed roles there. But that purpose is to push them into employer-based healthcare. Apple has all the logistics in the world. They can get something in one day to 77.6 million people. And here are their Whole Foods locations, which are going to be, or many of them are going to be healthcare clinics. As I sit here today, they're going to be healthcare clinics. And California has the most Whole Foods with 88. So you're going to be seeing, I think, at least 44 new healthcare clinics in California. If you look at the third column over, the one that's dotted, you can see that between Whole Foods and Amazon warehouses, 164 million people in America are within 10 miles of sorry about my phone, are within 10 miles of an Amazon. That's the lady, by the way, who's taking care of my basset hound right now. Anyway, Apple's advantage in all this is huge, huge data. And I'm going to throw my phone across the room now to shut it up. There, do not disturb. Apple's advantage also is big, big data, not only because it allows Amazon to crunch a bunch of data, but also because their Amazon Web Services throws off so much money. It's about 40% of the profit for Amazon right now, that it gives them cash to deploy in other areas. It lets them try things that other people can't afford to try. At this time last year, they were trying pharma, hospital supplies, and EHRs. The hospital supply business has kind of gone dark just a little bit, but pharmacy has not. They're heavily into pharmacy, and they want to be a pharmacy benefits manager. They spent $1 billion on Amazon's pill pack, which gave it immediately licenses, pharmacy licenses in 48 states, plus access to all that data. And Amazon is going to be, they already do it in Japan, they're going to be delivering your prescriptions same day. They're trying to do it within the hour. And 67 people that are on Amazon Prime right now say that they would be willing to have Amazon do that. Now, here's, as with the other two companies we've looked at, Amazon has come out with their own wearable in conjunction, and it's called Halo. It's a Halo app, and then the wearable is also called a Halo, and it's really kind of super creepy. Whereas the other two weren't creepy, these really are. You see the bottom, it says creepy yet unobtrusive and useful for quantified self-healthcare junkies. They've got one interesting patent where you can point your cell phone at your face and it can detect your heart rate. So you don't even need to be wearing the wearable. But for $64, you can get that Halo band. And of course, then there's an ongoing monitoring price. And it does the thing you would expect it to do, which is, follow your activity and the steps you take during the day. But it does other things that maybe you wouldn't have expected. It wants you to take a picture of your body so they can look at your body composition, because they believe weight is not the best measure of physical health. So they want to measure your body composition over time, which seems kind of super creepy to me. And I know there's no freaking way that I would put my body, on something like that and let them model my body. It also models your voice. For instance, if you're talking to somebody interviewing for your job, it'll know that you're stressed during that period and record that you're stressed, which means it could figure out that you're stressed when you talk with your boss. It could, if you're having an argument with your partner, it could perceive you as being annoyed, and it could figure out that you talk nicer to your dog than you do to your kids. That's super creepy. So they're able to gauge your mental state by the sound of your voice. I'm not sure I want part of that. And then they decide whether or not you're happy, confused, or worried. And don't think that isn't information that's going to be sent up into the cloud and measured by somebody. And it reminds me a lot of HAL, the computer in the bottom right from 2001: A Space Odyssey. HAL measured the voice of Dave Bowman and wouldn't let him back in the spacecraft. Said, "I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I just can't let you back in." Well, if they start measuring me and they look at the things that they know that I like, Amazon knows the things I order. If they know that Ron Galloway likes Jack Daniels, Chick-fil-A, and Nicorette, which is basically my 3 food groups, then they know that on down the line, I might not be that healthy, and my insurance might be rated higher. And don't think that this is not where it's going. We're going straight towards enterprise wellness programs and insurance being rated on your monitored health. That's exactly where we're going. It's a little bit creepy. Amazon has all kinds of big data things that are going on, as well as clinics. They're starting clinics. It's called Amazon Care. And what they're doing right now is, if you're an Amazon employee, you call in on the app through telemedicine. It puts you in touch with a doctor or a nurse, which will actually dispatch someone to your house or workplace if it decides you need them. So we're going right back to home healthcare now. So what they're doing, Amazon's gravitational pull is sending, and part of our third body problem is sending people straight back to home or to the workplace if that's where they're at. So don't think that Amazon Prime Health Insurance isn't coming. They're going to have all this data, maybe, and they already know what size clothes you wear. And they like to take bold investment decisions. They've said it for, 20, 30 years, however many that is. They've said that for a long, long time, and they're not going to stop. And it's interesting, if you look at their help wanteds, oh my Lord, my things may be dying. If you look at their help wanteds, they're looking for people for employer help. So from this point last year, let me know, guys, if you can't hear me. My AirPods may be dying. I may have to go solo. But they're also adding clinics and wearables to where they were last year. They've taken a complete tack. Tom Andriola, Vice Chancellor of IT at UC Irvine, said, "Why is Amazon a threat? Because they know more about my health and lifestyle than my healthcare provider does." All right. So anyway, they're just another body that's in our 3-body healthcare. Going to super race through Walmart right now. 10 years ago, Walmart said that they were opening up 2,000 healthcare clinics. That didn't happen. It languished for 10 years, but now it's starting again. And they're taking it seriously. These are healthcare clinics in the U.S. right now. And if you look at this chart, and my slides are available later on, Walmart's barely on there, but these are all the Walmart locations, and they're serious now about having clinics there. and they're going to do it for $25. Okay. This slide is interesting to me because they just built one in Cartersville, Georgia. And if you look all the way to the right, they built it in a modular fashion. All right. So using Blocks. This is Blocks' warehouse. They say we're partnering with Blocks, who makes prefab healthcare facilities. And this is what some of them look like, right? And these are some other Blocks projects. The interesting thing about this to me is that when Walmart pushes a new technology hard, it tends to become a standard. So this modular building out of healthcare facilities could easily become a standard because they made the barcode a standard in all our lives. And through their centers of excellence, right now, if you're a Walmart employee and you have big surgery you need done, they want to send you to big clinics, big destination medical centers like Cleveland, Mayo, Geisinger, and Virginia Mason. All right. And they'll pay for you and a partner to go with you. And these are some of the institutions they'll send you to. But what's interesting about all this is it's just reinforcing. Remember how I talked about small is getting bigger and big is getting bigger? Well, this is just another way that big is going to get bigger. These destination medical centers are just going, and this is one that Dignity Health is running, we're going to see bigger and bigger sort of theme parks of medicine being built as they get tied into not only Walmart centers of excellence, but other employer centers of excellence. And one place they might go, y'all should look at this chart later on. It's how a mall dies in stages, but they might go into malls. They already did this in Tennessee. Downtown Tennessee is just, traffic is terrible. And they took an old mall, 100 Oaks, and leased 880,000 square feet from it. Now there's 22 specialty clinics inside of that. That's something you're going to see a lot more, is mall space being built out and repurposed as healthcare centers. And they're doing this in Europe, little villages for people with dementia. Senior care is very close to my heart. There's a place in the Netherlands where they took a mall and turned it into an entire town for people with dementia, with little stores. They made the furniture and the music that's being played from like the 70s and 80s to make it more comfortable. It's just an amazing thing. And that's just an aside, but because of my audience, I thought y'all might find that interesting. So Walmart is going to be heavily pushing healthcare into clinics and adding to our big data part of the three body problem. Oh, and look at me. I'm almost in time for my big finish. Let me read y'all some quotes. Joel Klein of University of Maryland Medical System said, half of all healthcare and medical will be virtual in 5 years. David Nash of Jefferson College Population Health said, there will be no distinction between in-person and virtual visits. Emily Weber of Riley's in Indianapolis said, access to quality care will rely as much on your access to Wi-Fi as it does on bricks and mortar. All right, so what's happening is we went from house calls to institutions. Now we're going from institutions to larger institutions, smaller sized facilities, and right back into the house. So to tie this thing back up into my three body problem, we started with the patient and the doctor. That was a manageable set of orbits right there. Then we added hospitals into the orbit. It made things sort of hard to understand. By the way, misplaced slide. But if Walmart just builds out a quarter of their stores and Whole Foods builds out a quarter of their stores, that's 3,000 retail healthcare clinics we could have in the next 3 years. And there's 5,000 hospitals right now. So anyway, we have healthcare being delivered in hospitals, clinics, and homes all together. You see they're intersecting in our little three body problem. So we don't know where A is going to be. It's impossible to predict where A is going to be, where B is going to be, and where C is going to be. We don't know where it's going, but these tech companies are going to be huge influencers in each of those orbits and add more to the gravitational pulls of each. And therefore, the future is here. but it's going to be completely, if you're a believer in the three body problem, the future of healthcare is going to be completely unpredictable. Thank you very much for your time. And now, if we can, I'd like to take some questions.
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. Hey, thank you so much. That was
finished on time.
Yeah, I know.
Fascinating.
And incredible.
Yeah.
And no rabbit holes. I'm so proud of you, my friend.
You must be wearing an Apple Watch that's buzzing you and saying, "Give me the countdown."
Yeah, well, yes, it's telling me I'm getting I took it off during our call. It's like you're getting a phone call, which is my neighbor taking care of my basset hound. Because you don't want a basset hound howling during the middle of my speech. Anyway, quick questions before my AirPods run out.
Absolutely. And I'm surprised it's not constantly reminding you to breathe. My goodness.
Oh, mine does that. But in particular, I'm very fascinated by Walmart building out a lot of these modular clinics. It's going to be big in California. And the fact that data is actually moving the locations of the delivery points of healthcare delivery.
Right.
Hospitals are going to be there, but they're going to be bigger. And a lot of them are going to be much bigger, like Mayo. That's a $5 billion project they have going there. Right. But then we're going to add at least 2,000 more smaller clinics through a combination of Walmart and others, and so many of them are going to be built in a modular fashion. Right. That's what interests me, and that's what I wanted to pass along to your audience.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, we do have a question already, and those of you that want to ask Ron a question, please put it, type it into the Q&A tab in your app or on the Zoom section itself. You mentioned trust in Apple and their ability to, handle data and do that. Do you have a relative ranking of trust for the other big tech entrants to healthcare, and how might that evolve and influence market penetrations?
I would give Apple an 8 out of 10, if not more. I would go Apple first, probably Google second, Walmart third, and then Amazon fourth. And the reason I say that is because I've read Amazon's privacy statement, and it's, as you would expect, very long. And what it says is, we promise not to share this data with third parties if you don't want us to, but they're not saying they won't keep it for themselves even after you delete it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and what the problem with that is, you can take anonymized healthcare data and, let's say, in fact, there was a study in Chicago where they had 200,000 people give anonymized healthcare data, but you're able to, somebody cross-correlated that data with data from their cell phones, and they were able to figure out who the patients were.
Yeah,
right? So in other words, when you cross-pollinate data from the phone world over into the healthcare world, then, you really can identify who that person are and that who that person is, and that's the problem with medical privacy. Walmart, I've always found, takes that kind of thing very seriously, but Apple, as long as Tim Cook is in charge at Apple, I think that's why hospitals are working with them more than they're more anxious to work with Apple more than others. It's because they handle privacy in what I believe is a very responsible manner. And they make you at every point say, yes, I'll share this. Yes, I'll share this. Yes, to the point of which I'm using their weather app. And like every day I'm like, yes, you can see where my weather is. Yes. So.
Well, and Tim Cook, was very clear last year. He said Apple will be a healthcare company. I mean, that's making no bones about it.
Yeah, that's where their future is going to be. And if you watch their last two events, WWDC, the developer conference in June, and then the event they had this week, and especially the emphasis they gave on 5G, and with what the watch is able to do now, and so the combination of the watch, these things, which are the real sleeper in all this, is these guys are going to be bigger. And, everybody's used to seeing people walk around with these things in their ear now. It's not unusual. So I think where Apple's actually heading is to where just leave your iPhone at home. All you need to be out and about is your phone and your pods. That's exactly, I believe, where we're going. And it's all they really need to monitor the health care that they want. And it's just a boon. It is a boon for seniors as our population gets more and more gray, and it lets people live in to live in place longer, which I've actually spoken to a lot of senior living facilities people who are worried that because of these technologies, there's going to be less of a demand for their type of facilities.
Right.
There'll be more of a demand for healthcare facilities away from the hospital because they want to put healthcare where their customers are, which is why they were like malls were perfect. But yeah, it's just interesting that healthcare, the distribution curve of the flattening of healthcare, which used to be at the top of the bell curve as hospitals, is flattening out now amongst the hospitals, in-home, and other facilities.
Here's another one, Ron. If Walmart, Amazon, Target are getting into the MOB business, what role will healthcare architects play or not?
Not all clinics are going to be the ones that I said they were going to be. They're not all going to be blocks. Blocks probably couldn't even scale up that quickly. But I think the role, if you do, as more health care clinics are built in more and more unusual, unused retail spaces, not necessarily malls, but I'll throw out another one for you that is about to happen. It's movie theaters. All right. Movie theaters are gone. And there's going to be probably at least, not all movie theaters, but I believe by my count, there's going to be about 700 or 800 movie theater spaces that can be repurposed. And a lot of them already are, not a lot, but several have been repurposed towards healthcare. They're not as big as a mall, but they're sort of perfect for certain type things. So I think a lot of what the architects are going to be doing is helping companies, as employer-based healthcare sort of takes over, helping companies build on-site clinics, but also repurposing places that, because of Amazon, because movies are dying, because malls are dying, repurposing those type of places for new uses. And don't forget the senior care. Some of the work being done in senior care by architects is absolutely inspiring. So to me, it's amazing and inspiring, and kind of, and I'll tell you what one architect did was, people with dementia sometimes want to escape. And what one of these centers did was they built a fake bus stop. And so these folks will go to the bus stop thinking they're able to get out of the place. And, after a while, my dad had Alzheimer's. After a while, Alzheimer's patients kind of just get on doing something else.
They forget why they're there, right?
Yeah,
they forget why they're at the bus stop. Right.
Yeah, which is sad, but happy and brilliant, right? Right. And so those are the sort of innovations. And the other innovations that architects should be looking for is how to integrate all these sensors, floor sensors, motion sensors, light sensors. There's going to be a whole lot done with light and sound therapy within healthcare facilities, stuff that we haven't thought of before. Can't remember the name of it. There's one hospital in particular that in their ERs, they use different kind of lighting depending on what the patient is in there for, because different types of lighting are soothing, right? And at different times of day, in the middle of the night, you don't want to be blasted with fluorescent light, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not only that, it's for the architect, it's integrating the literally hundreds of different types of sensors that are going to be used in these buildings to collect information.
We've got just a couple of minutes, and we have a couple of really good questions. So
I've got all the time in the world.
So Scott's going to ask.
Until these things run out.
All right. So another question: Big Tech is actively making it harder, or is Big Tech actively making it harder to leave their ecosystem once you're invested into it?
Yes, absolutely.
That's their intent, right? That's their business model.
And
right?
that's their business model. Everything in my house is Apple. I'm a little bit afraid of Amazon. I had Amazon for a while, but then I just didn't want them listening to me all the time. Apple came out with something which I can pre-order today. They redid the HomePod, which is like the little Alexa speaker, but I believe it's more private and it does cooler things. But the lights in my house, Apple TV, my watch, my computers, everything in my house is controlled by Apple, to the point which, when I go out for a walk, my lights turn off and my music turns off. And then when I get back in, my lights turn on a certain way and it puts on chilled out music for me. And it tells me what's going on with my day. My life is absolutely, and by the way, I'm all the way in the Walmart ecosystem now with Walmart Plus, because all my groceries and stuff that I would normally get from Walmart, I have them bring to me now. So I'm all in. I mean, I'm the guy that made the Walmart movie, but I'm all in that part of their ecosystem too. Amazon knows everything about me because of the stuff I've ordered. I'm very wary of them. And Google, I really appreciate what they're doing in terms of money they're pouring into research, but I'm not sure I quite understand their stance on privacy.
Yeah, where they're going with it, right?
Another fast question, and then we have to wrap. But you mentioned earlier about how these tech companies. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. We have one before that. I apologize. So we have two. What role will Microsoft play in the future of healthcare? They now have a CEO trusted like Tim Cook and have a world-class team in genomics and analytics. And
they
genomics,
do.
I think, is something that we haven't really.
I left genomics out of it, and Google right now is the powerhouse in genomics through 23andMe. So that's true. Microsoft's, you're right, their CEO, Nadella, is very Tim Cookian. He's a stand-up guy and extremely smart. I trust Microsoft. I really do. I mean, they're a big tech company. They're kind of one of the more boring ones, but they're a big tech company that I would trust with my data. The noise they're making in healthcare now is through Azure, and they're also trying to have their FHIR protocol. I wouldn't be surprised to see them buy an EHR vendor, but then that might prevent other vendors from using Azure. But I know they're working strongly with Epic, who's the number one healthcare vendor. And I forgot to mention that Amazon is strongly working with Cerner. And I bet 30% of the people that are listening to us right now, their electronic healthcare record is Cerner. So Amazon may already have you. And but yeah, I would trust my data with Microsoft. I left them out just because I wanted to get the ones that right now I felt were making the biggest impact.
Sure. So pertinent to our audience at this time, much of what you're saying is how data is driving the healthcare process and how it's really being enhanced and driven by big tech. As a result of that, and all the tracking that they're doing on us, do you think there will be a trend of a decrease in hospital or clinic size? And that goes back to your early, the 40-year change from the past to now in terms of how many facilities there were and the number of beds. And this is taking it to the next step. So, futurist, your predictions, sir. Come on.
Here it is. I'm going to draw it.
We're going to hold you to it.
I'm going to draw it in a bell curve. All right. Here's where we were with hospitals right here. And what's going to happen is, so right here, these are the clinics, right? Okay. The clinics are going to get bigger. The 100 to 500 bed hospitals are going to get smaller, and the big hospitals like that giant thing at Mayo is going to get bigger. The thing at Mayo is so huge that there's a Hilton there that's part of it. And when you check into the Hilton, they take your blood at the Hilton, right? These destinations are going to become huge destinations, bigger and bigger, because employers, if the Fortune 500 sees that what Walmart is doing with their centers of excellence is working, then let's just say Fortune 500 companies decide to do that too. There's 22 million employees at Fortune 500 companies that would just make these centers of excellence bigger and bigger. So the smaller are going to get more numerous, okay, and the bigger are just going to get bigger.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome, Ron. Always a pleasure, buddy. Good to see
Yeah.
you. I hope you hit them long and straight this afternoon as you get to go out. Hopefully the weather clears for you.
Well, I'm going to play regardless because it's I live in one of the most beautiful places in the country, and it's a shame to not play golf here. And here's the other reason: once the Masters comes to town, all the courses shut down for 2 weeks, so you literally can't play.
Right.
But thank y'all for having me again.
Thank you,
I
Ron.
love talking with y'all, and y'all have a great rest of the conference.
We're all going to buy more Apple shares after this. So
You probably should.
okay. Take care. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ron.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay, everybody. The breakout rooms are actually in session, and we do encourage you to go ahead and click in to the link that will take you on a virtual tour of the Tangram's healthcare showroom with the steel case furniture, and it's definitely worth seeing. So we'll see you back here at 10:40.